Hey, Juan here. In today's video, we're going to go through 5 tips to help you building a strategy. Building a strategy is very important because as a product person or as a company, you will have a vision. Whatever is your vision, whatever you are trying to do, that it will help people's lives, that it will help companies be more productive, that is going to save the world in one way or another. This is a very important vision for you as a company or as a product. But strategy is going to tell you how you are going to achieve your vision. What are going to be the key focus areas that you will have to pay attention to in order to be able to achieve that vision. So first things first, in order to start building your strategy, you have a big prerequisite. You actually had to have a vision. You had to know what you are trying to achieve as a company. So it's very important, obviously, that you sit down and define what is this problem that your users are having. And it's really important that you figure out the problem very well. And it's not just figuring out one problem, it's actually defining and understanding very deeply what this problem means. This actually will help you a lot when defining then the solutions to actually fix or solve this problem. Understanding the needs of the customers, understanding how those needs potentially are going to be evolving in the future and continuously paying attention to them. It's always going to put you in a winning solution when you are actually trying to figure out what those users that you are building your beautiful products for are actually needing. And of course, having a vision is really important because it helps you to keep the focus. And keeping the focus is key, and it's something that companies tend to underestimate and easily reprioritize other things that might be quick wins or low-hanging fruits that are not aligning with your vision. The second tip is that you have to actually define very clearly who are going to be your customer personas. Who are those user personas, customer segments that you're actually going to bring solutions to? It's very easy to say, especially for consumer tools, that everybody will use my product. But the reality is that's never the case. The reality is that there is going to be people, certain type of people, that are going to be benefiting from your tool much more than others. So you might be building the new social media app. It's very important that you understand that is this new social media dedicated or focused for all the elderly people, or is it focused for teenagers, or is it actually focused for middle-aged people? This is going to be very important to do from the beginning, because this is going to tell you much more how this tool should work and also how it should look and should be perceived by the different type of users. As well, especially if you are starting, it's very important that you niche down, that you actually find what are the customer segments that you want to focus on. Especially if you're beginning, don't try to focus in too many, try to focus just in a few of them and define them properly and see how your products are actually going to bring solutions for them. And this is still important over time, but it's critical when you are starting the company. But if you are an established company, it's still key that you understand who are your customer segments and how are you communicating with them. And also, it's very important that you understand which ones are those customer segments that are really close to using the product, but maybe it's not your focus area. Because for one reason or another, you still don't have the proper solution to actually solve their problems. And try to sell them your tool as the workaround to solve their problems sometimes might end up in distracting you from your focus unless you make it as part of the strategy that yes, we are going to build a new product to actually solve and actually address this customer segment. But this typically might mean much more work than you expect, because it's going to potentially mean a lot of development, a lot of implementation to actually get it done and to actually understand deeply what are the problems that these new customer segments are having, but actually how am I going to solve them and how am I going to be messaging to them. So there's many things to take into account when trying to involve a new customer segment, and it's not so obvious as this is a feature that they could be using, this is a product that could be interesting for them, but it's not quite there. It's very important to define properly what are the customer segments that you're addressing and which ones you don't. And if you want to take a new one, how are you going to do that? The next one is defining the goals to actually achieve your vision. This one is actually going to be very similar to what are going to be the strategies to achieve that vision. Here you have to focus on what are these value propositions that people are actually going to be very interested about your product. Think about Tesla. I'm aware that I'm talking about Tesla very often, but think about how they do the things. I have to think how they actually message their value propositions. How do they want to make the world a better place by reducing the carbon emissions into the air caused by cars or different means of transportation? For them, the way to go, the goal is actually doing this by building electric vehicles. So that's one, obviously, of the main strategies of how to do it. Another main strategies might be on how do you actually go to market. Again, Tesla is a good example of how to do it in a very different way from other vendors. How do they do updates on their software on the way that the car behaves very often, and they don't have major releases of new versions of the car, but the car is evolving over time. So here is where you have to define what are these goals on how you are going to achieve success. And it's not just product goals, it's also go-to-market goals. How are you going to sell? How are you going to promote? How are you going to support your tools or your products? It's really important that you define and understand this clearly, because then you will see what are the strategies for you to build successful products. The fourth tip is always define properly your MVP. Always look into what is your minimum viable product, and I don't mean necessarily the first iteration of your product. Just do this with whatever feature you are building. Whatever new addition that you are doing with your product, always do it from the perspective of what is the minimum viable to actually get there. And in many cases, the minimum viable sometimes is like a horizontal, but you can also perceive it as a vertical that is also giving a flavor of what is the functionality, but how this is going to working, how this is going to be sold, how is it affecting the user experience, and try to actually make sure that the people, the early adopters, are actually getting a good flavor of what this is going to mean. Being able to take this approach is usually a much more engaging journey for your customers. You can actually listen more to them, where you can actually evolve your products over time in a much more closer collaboration with those users. And defining an MVP, this should go without saying, but it's something that maybe is not so much pay attention to sometimes, is that whenever you're building a product, whenever you're trying to find a problem that is meaningful for users and building that solution, you always have to have an idea of how are you going to make an impact on your business. So it is very important to always pay attention to this. So how is this actually going to reflect on how the business is going to be successful in the future, and actually be able to continue to bring these solutions and these products that your customers enjoy. And finally, the fifth one is define your success KPIs. And define them from the very beginning. Sometimes you might not know exactly what is going to be the target for a KPI in the very beginning, and that's kind of okay as long as you understand that this is a metric that is going to be key for you as a company to actually perform and be able to achieve your goals. Defining these KPIs should also actually help you achieving the vision that you have. You can think about more typical KPIs like customer acquisition, retention, revenue, but you can also think about other KPIs to track more like unique selling points, where you will think about, for example, if I go back to the example of Tesla, one of the key selling points for Tesla has been that they provide a much longer range than other competitors do, especially in the very beginning. Nowadays, competitors are starting to catch up in that front. As well, they also look and focus a lot on the user experience of their cars, which is completely different from your regular user experience that you have typically had in more traditional cars. So defining these KPIs and actually having a target for them is going to actually help you to achieve this vision. Of course, a KPI has to be something measurable. So for example, range of a car, you can have a target for that one, and that's something that you can measure. How am I getting or reaching that KPI? Usability, yes, no, depends on how you count it. You can consider that EPS is a way to measure UX from the customer point of view. Are they enjoying your products or not? So we can continue talking about a strategy forever. There's many things to take into account whenever defining a strategy. And this is just a very brief list of things that you should take into account and pay attention when you're defining your strategies and see how you can actually achieve your goals. I would like to hear your thoughts. Did I miss something? Is there anything that you think that it would be much more important that I've missed in this list? Please comment below and let me know. I create this type of videos every week, so if you want to hear more about how to create products or how to build strategies, how to work in business in modern tech companies, please come next week and I'll see you next time. And as always, I will see you next week. Stay safe.